Hi, welcome to the Agent Odyssey. I'm Matt Wyman, co-founder and CEO of Acario. Acario provides you with a simulation service for voice and chat agents so you can stabilize them and get them to production safely. Today, I have joining me Matt Murphy, co-founder and CEO of Faction Group. I hesitate there because you are involved in so much. They're like all these things you're active in. Tell us a bit about what you're up to these days.
Matt, thank you so much for having me today. I get it. I wear a lot of hats. I wouldn't know it any other way. Whether it's my ADHD or my Asperger's, I stay pretty busy. I also have a tendency to use a lot of words. So if you see me get rambling, you just hit that stop sign. I'll slow it down. But with that being said, I am co-founder and CEO of the Faction Group, an AI organization based out of Dallas. But I sit on, boards as chair, advisor. I'm a consultant. I'm a father, I'm a dad, I'm a recent grandfather. We have operating businesses under our control. And so needless to say, I come to the marketplace with a lot of perspectives and I do wear a lot of hats. With that said, the AI hat is my favorite one to wear. I'm super excited about what's going on in the marketplace. And almost every day, there's definitely something to talk about. So I'm glad that we got a chance to circle up today and just share a
Absolutely. And you
conversation.
know what? Actually, that's where I'd like to start. You have this opportunity to see all these different business problems, and you have an opportunity to see all these different types of agents being built. But you recently posted on LinkedIn that everyone should stop deploying agents. Like, whoa, tell us more. Like, why are you hitting the brakes?
Well, it's interesting is because deep inside that post and that video is 100% legit. I am telling people stop, pull the brake. And I make that joke on almost every call with customers. My last name's Murphy. And so I wake up every day knowing something's going to go wrong and I got to be ready to put that fire out. And as we've been in this agent game aggressively for the last 2 years, building inside of organizations from Fortune 100 to small startups that are just now getting funded, we have, and I think that, one of the skills that we offer our clients or one of the things that makes my phone ring a lot is that I do like to run
Mm,
into the fire. And so with that, you got to be willing to be burned and you got to have teams that are have a little bit of scar tissue that are accustomed to taking one on the chin in order to win. And what we've done is we've seen that a lot of agent deployments were lacking one thing, and that was preparedness. And preparedness can be a very general term. I call it readiness, whatever steps it was, but we're actually deploying more agents than ever. That video kicked off a bigger lead funnel than I ever anticipated. And needless to say, it was a lot of people going, wait, Matt, you've been telling us to buy agents for this last year. Now you're telling us to stop. And I'm like, yes, I'm just telling you to stop, pause, process, and go, I need a plan. And so now the Faction Group will build you an agent, but only if
mm.
we've built you a plan. And that means it has to have a solid ROI, solid KPIs to attach to, needs that meet the needs of the organization as well as the end users. And with that in mind, I think making sure that we aren't overlooking the technicalities that make AI work. But I think in many cases, people are overlooking the common sense of how their business runs and how AI works. And so that's where that stemmed from
Well,
that post. I'm
I'm
glad you caught it.
curious that last phrase, how their business works. Are you finding that people actually understand? Because quite often in my experience and talking to different customers about products and about the larger business, quite often there's a disconnect. People are not actually sure where the levers are. They think they know, but they're not actually sure it's connected. And they may or may not have ever had the chance to pull the lever to see if it's actually attached to what they think it's attached to. So how are you bridging this?
Well, I early in the game we decided that we weren't going to sell AI or acronyms. We really just talk about results for customers. And needless to say, that means you got to dive into their business. You got to understand their business. And that's why we carry a very tenured team at Faction. The fact is, we're all consultants, we're all operators, we all have technical platforms we've developed and built and scaled on our own. So when we walk into something, we know that it's not going to be picture perfect. We also know no two environments
Hmm.
actually look alike. And so the definitions of how somebody would prepare or get ready for AI is very different in every customer. But there's one thing that seems very common among everyone. The fact that AI operates differently. And when I say I'm on the autism spectrum with my Asperger's, I know that I run on a little bit of a different operating system. And because of that, I have to do things throughout my day to manage that so I can get along with the normal operating system. AI is a very similar case where for the last 50 years, humans have been writing code. And that code comes in a very systematic way of sprints, QAs, tests, retests, launch, production, sandbox, and all these particular units of metrics that we've measured what development looks like. AI is a little more dynamic than that, and quite frankly, way faster. And so the ability to catch things in a bigger moat or a longer development cycle have gone out the window. Things happen too fast. And if you're a business operator in today's day and age, let's call it, you have economy issues, you have inflation issues, you have customer issues, and the fact is, anyone that's in your competitive space that's deploying these tools is also doing it for the fact that they're trying to siphon off market share from you using the tools. And what I tell people very commonly is I am super ready to bolt on this bleeding edge alien ship to your current environment, but your current environment is a 1967 Mustang in comparison, and it is not ready for this alien ship to be bolted onto the front, back, or side of it. And that's what we need to talk to customers about is getting aligned on what their infrastructure needs to look like. But that isn't just tech, right? What are the humans in the business doing? What is the output of the business? Go ahead. I know I triggered
No,
one
no, no,
there.
you hit a couple of them actually. I want to come back to the timing thing in a few moments, but I think actually you're touching on something that I'm always thinking
Okay.
about, which is where's the pull versus the push. That is to say, so as you're going through, and how often are people so ready in their business and understanding they know where they're pulling, like which problems specifically that they're pulling on, versus they're hearing lots of vendors pushing ideas at them, and they're saying, yeah, that kind of makes sense. Yeah, this one makes sense over here. Are you having to like reset the entire frame because you're saying, okay, well, let's come all the way back?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how are you going through that?
Yeah, that's exactly where it is that early on in the game, we were called to solve problems like one-off use cases, which is, oh, I'm having a problem here. Can you apply an
What
agent
kind of
to it to
problems?
solve it? The
What
answer is
kind of things are
always
you
yes, you
seeing that
can.
like people are trying and then it's like, woof, this is
Um,
too much?
an example would be a scheduling agent. So we have an organization that has uh, 24 different advisors that are managing hundreds of client accounts. And those advisors, it's a financial company, it's a wealth advisement company. They have to meet with their customers very regularly, but it takes that you have to have a compliance
Mm,
officer, you have to have the financial manager, you have to have the customer, and the customer likely has a business and other things in their life. And so, needless to say, they have 5 different people that can sit inside of their walls that do nothing but calendar scheduling all day long. And so they have calendars all over their screens. They're looking at customer calendars, they're texting people, they're sending emails, they're checking calendars. It is a full time job for 5 humans. Well, the power of an agent is that you could build a tool that can do all of that scheduling and highly optimize all that scheduling because of its ability to consume all that calendar activity, to create dedicated communication channels with every one of those end users, and to optimize the scheduling case to so much so that you could go from 5 humans to 1 human that's orchestrating the agents that's now doing the scheduling. It's an incredible use case. What happens though is the dominoes, and the dominoes are this: you start building that agent. Well, that agent needs root access login to various systems and departments and teams. So you go, well, this was just a simple issue with these 5 people that do this job every day. And you go, well, what are all the systems they log into? Are all those systems prepared for an agent to take over? Part two, what exposure or compliance risks are you opening by allowing that agent to have login access to everybody's calendar in the business, to everybody's email in the business, and the calendars of your customers in their personal space? So, needless to say, the ability to have to hit a stop sign and say, take a step back. We understand that there's a scheduling issue here, but we also need to look at the full department. What are you scheduling for? What is the benefit to the consumer? And the way you write AI, you have the ability to back into what's the best case scenario for the end user and optimize from there. And so those take plans, those take steps of assessing where are things going to go wrong. And that also you have to back into what things are going to go right. And you got to score that and determine that it's worth going after that issue before you solve some of the operational issues. But earlier in the podcast, you had mentioned something that I think is important, and it was the inbound calls from a electrical contractor in the Dallas Fort Worth area. And this is one of my fun ones to share because it was such, they had such great intentions. And the great intentions were, and you had mentioned a moment ago, this is really important. The push side from the industry, generating leads, generating leads, generating leads, more sales, more leads. Push, push, push. You can't drink enough of somebody at the end of your DMs in LinkedIn in your email telling you, don't you want some more leads? And you know that they got ChatGPT to read your website because they're like, hey, Matt, I noticed that you're in the AI agent training game. Would you like more customers for that? And all these lead tools are super powerful, well built because they were built by many of the guys that managed and had surfaced SEO
Mhm.
optimization, lead optimization, Salesforce automation. All those pieces had been optimated in the public space. That those are easy to build to. That's where the pull comes from the space or the push. The pull is what happens when you turn one of those on. So this electrical contractor out of Dallas calls me. He's got 400 techs spread across the DFW area. They have an inbound lead system, a large electrical contractor. And he called me up and he asked me the biggest question I've gotten in quite some time. He said, Matt, can you help me with my Google reviews? And I said, I know you were referred to me because I put fires out, but this doesn't sound like a fire I'm normally putting out. Tell me about your Google reviews. I said, tell me where they're at. And so I pulled them up on my screen and I was like, looks like you're having some challenges responding to your customers. Everybody's pretty mad about you not calling them back. Tell me more about that. He said, well, we turned on an AI agent that generates leads. I said, great. Seems like a pretty good solution. Many people are intrigued by. Who doesn't want more leads? I run multiple businesses. Who wants, I want more
Of
leads.
course.
Matt, you want more leads. But the problem was they fed him 5,000 leads in a week. He has 2 human schedulers that sit in the office and take those inbound leads from an info at inbox. So 5,000 leads came to an inbox. 2 humans who show up every day and log in and read the inbox and assign those projects to technicians. They're only able to process
Yep.
200 of those a week. So the other 4,800 that week, not very happy. What was my answer? Turn the agent off. Why? Because the 2 people that are receiving it need the agent. You got to start on the ops side. You cannot give your customers the most powerful bleeding edge tool that's ever existed and then stand there with a 40-year-old answer to how you're going to solve the problem. So those things are the things that really start to bubble up when you say hit the stop sign, start to think about planning, make sure that you have a backup plan because there's the other side of the coin. I have another group that called us, large mid-market company that's in insurance claims, and they had an offshore call center that they built agents to replace. So needless to say, they put an agent call center in place to replace their offshore call center. It worked great for 5 months until it didn't,
Mm.
and it went down. And when it went down, the 30,000 calls that come into that call center every day were not answered for 4
Ooh.
days. So why is that? Because they terminated the contract with the offshore. And when the agents failed, there's no backup plan. What do? You can't call the offshore group and say, hey, just turn the phones back on and start answering. And in this particular case, it was running so smoothly in test. It ran so smoothly in production. But then when it failed in production, nobody had a backup plan that could serve the customer need, which is you can't miss all these calls. Missing 120,000 calls for them is a huge issue. And they've had to send all of their end users, apologies. They've had to roll out some incentives to keep people warm. They had some churn related to it. But at the end of the day, what I find is the same thing over and over. There is good intentions and a lack of plans. And so for us, we aren't serving intentions anymore.
Well,
We're only
and
serving
I mean,
plans.
that makes a lot of sense. In some respects, what you're describing is not new to AI. It's not new to agents, and it's change control. I mean, do you understand the change control you're going through? But where it is new is it's the pace. How fast does that change happen? And usually, new systems as they come in, whether it's because of features or capabilities or how hard it is to integrate them. There's lots of reasons, but the change control happens over a slower time period, right? People have to come in, they learn the new tool, they learn what the features are, they start to use a little bit more of it, you start to introduce it to more teams. These sort of the blast radius, if you will, comes out at a very predictable rate. Agents, much more capable in many cases, they can solve the problem, as you said, tested well in production, ready to go, flip a switch. Where was the change control? They could have done that for 10% of the conversations and then 30% of the conversations, then 50% of the they could have had a ramp to it, but that probably was not a concept that they were exposed to previously, that kind of rolling concept. But then also, you mentioned this earlier, right actually at the beginning, you talked about timing. And I think this is the other aspect of
Mhm.
agents, that there is we're seeing this technology moving through. These models in many cases are you are told on day one, this model will go away in 1 year. So if you've used that model on day one, you put it through its paces, you got yourself into a place where you can trust it. How long does that take? Few weeks, minimum few weeks. You're going to get between 10 and 11 months on that model
Right.
before you have to start over. You're not going to start over after 11 months. You're going to start over to get the next model going. So you're going to get what, 9 months out of it? So you can trust your agents for 9 months. That's kind of where we sit right now. So now how do these people who are receiving agents think about change control when the technology that they're relying on is constantly moving? How are you helping people through this?
Well, I'm trying to get to their triggers. Let's be clear. Executives have triggers, however they deploy budget, the reason that they made a decision to add this technology or integrate into certain groups or problems, whatever the case may be. But where we continuously land is, I referred to it with you before, and I think I continue to move down this path. We are in the age of
Tell me more.
obsolescence. And when I think about when I think about the age of obsolescence, is there's two sides to it. One is the functional side. I can build an agent today, and I know that that model may have an 11-month window by which that model is going to be useful until it terminates itself. And so the ability to sell multi-year contracts or to build yourself some runway for that agent to continue to scale and grow becomes much shorter. And so planning in short sprints for your future is a really tedious process. And you've really got to get into the weeds of how your business operates in quarters rather than years or multi years. Because the other side of obsolescence is not only do the tools have a a shelf life, we would call it, but the foundational providers of all these tools, the moment they see one of these functions or tools performing well in a use case in the marketplace, you can blink your eyes and overnight they roll it out in an update. They ship it wherever it is. And those are the Googles, the Metas, the Open AIs. They have a vested interest in having as much functionality as possible without leaving any white space for anyone else. And so where you land is the technology is moving fast. It almost cancels itself out in less than a year in many cases. And in doing so, if your technology roadmap does not align with prioritization that allows those functions to find their pace inside of your business, you could be doing yourself as much damage by deploying too soon and not planning for that longer term future play just to solve a small problem, when it's true that, I'm going to take a line from Deloitte's chief innovation officer on stage at the Move event for auto manufacturers 2 weeks ago, and she asked the whole room. She said, "Raise your hand if you've built a platform with human coders before 2025." Of course, the whole room raises their hand. She stands there and says, "All of your platforms are obsolete. The future will be a complete remapping of your business where all of these systems are not only written by AI, they're optimized by AI, and they will scale at the time and shelf life of AI. The problem with shelf life now is you're bolting it onto a legacy system that isn't actually designed to operate. So now you're creating two individual tech teams. You have a future proofing tech team that's rolling out AI as fast as it can, but you also have these legacy tech teams that have to keep the hardcore systems that manage your whole operation under control. And there seems to be a little bit of clash in those two groups, because you can't be a CEO in today's temperature and not want to deploy AI. The government saying, "Hey, we'll give you a dollar to dollar match tax incentive if you'll deploy AI." And when the economy is doing what it's doing, your answer is cut costs, create efficiency, generate more revenue with less people, freeze hiring. These are all buzzwords we're seeing on the news every day. Why are they happening? Because AI is here and everybody wants to have an answer. But unlike Y2K, which was terrifying, unlike mobile, which is now we have to serve people wherever their pocket is at. And then you move to all the data collection systems that have now run on top of this, the cloud and business and digital transformation to the cloud. AI is the newest version of digital transformation. The only difference is it's likely going to take a retool of your brand, your system, your tools, your org chart, your workflows, your automations, and all of your systems over the next five
You
to
are the
10 years.
perfect person for me to ask this of, because I've been thinking quite a lot about it. If you go through some of the past technical revolutions, if you will, quite a lot of the technology thinking that was happening was in the space of what can we do differently, what's new. And mobile's a great example. Okay, suddenly we have these mobile devices. People started thinking about, how do I bring compute into our environment? How do I put compute in people's pockets when they're walking down the street, when they're checking in for a flight? Can I do that differently? It's all about new, and the vast majority, new ideas, new spaces, new opportunities. But a lot of AI, won't say all of it, but a lot of AI uses the word you just used, which is retooling. We're looking at how we
Yep.
replace, rebuild, retool. This is going to change. This does change everything about how this revolution works. And then if you have, I love your term, the obsolescence, and if it's obsolete in short time frames, the change control is through the roof. So where does this go?
Mhm.
What does this look like in 2 years?
Well, I think it's going to be messy. And just to be fair, I think the next 2 to 5 years are going to be messy because we are so deeply rooted in the ways we do business and the way systems operate, especially if the way we've embedded cybersecurity into our businesses the last few years. There's a little reluctance to retool. It's like, whoa, we've spent the last 30 years retooling. And it's like, well, it's a product that's evolving. You're never not retooling. However, this one's different. And it's different because in these past iterations, and actually, this is the reason I always joke about Y2K where I cut my teeth. Y2K was interesting because it was a complete unknown. And because it was an unknown, it had fear. And so you add fear and an unknown and a must do. And the must do is that you have to do something about it. And at that point in time, I was moving, I was at IBM moving people from AS400s to the cloud and patching all their SAP and JD Edwards systems. And needless to say, who knows? Who knows? I don't know if anything that happened for Y2K made a difference. I don't know that anyone will ever know if it did or it didn't. AI, we're definitely going to know that it made a difference, but it's that same fear factor and tension that business leaders are dealing with. But along those lines, mobile's a great example. It's probably the most recent example. I talk about social a lot too, because not only did we add mobile to our pocket, we now added customer to everything we do. And influencers are now driving our brand activity. And so, needless to say, there are a lot of things that have come down the pipe, but the difference in this one is that if I was to look at two businesses side to side on paper today in the same industry, the way I could build a business from scratch today in my competitive marketplace, where AI writes all of my code from the first line of code, and agents are writing your code, building your business, managing your code, managing your security standards, managing your SOC 2, managing your HIPAA. And this is a closed loop AI system completely rebuilt from the ground up. Well, I don't think that many businesses are going to be prepared to go that route, but it's coming. The difference is how do you manage that change management? How do you manage those incremental changes in your business in a much more compact timeline than what we've done? Those 2, 3, 4, 5 year moats are now 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months. And so where I arrive at is there are some safety factors that are going to come into play. Obsolescence is a word that we have to get used to, but more so that it's going to evolve quickly. But the one thing that I think is completely overlooked is the human capital factor of all these businesses. Because again, if I build two businesses side by side today, the one that I have to go through digital transformation, it may have thousands of employees. If I only need 10% of that human capital load to deliver the same product to that same market at the same speed, if not better, that the new company that starts from scratch to go after that marketplace that has enough funding and enough fuel and enough technology, that AI system from the ground up will scale faster, will build quicker, and will consume more market share without question, while all the others are trying to digitally transform. And so I think that my fear among all humans should be the foundational providers decide that they're going to verticalize all of their solutions and then they're going to operationalize all of their solutions, that they could build a business in a can. You can just say, hey, I want to open a bank, and you sign up for your bank. Here's your AI platform. Here's your agents for customer care. Here is your, all of your processes for generating funding and dollars and bank accounts. And you need 4 humans to run this whole bank when you needed 40 humans before. Those changes are so significant that the planning process over the next couple of years should be the number one priority for businesses, because those that try to race AI, unfortunately, every department you have is going to lose that race. Now, if you're carving out departments, take on a department at a time. Win that race in that department. I know where it's starting, though, and this was my concern. It's starting in sales, it's starting in marketing. And so they're over here turning on more leads, they're over here turning on more sales. Well, what does that lead to? More production, more inventory, more customer communications, more warranty issues, more service issues, more service calls. All of the volume that you build on the other side of that, you're never going to human staff it in the future. You're going to build technology that's going to staff the operational side of that. So needless to say, digital transformation is about to be as digitally transformed as we've ever seen it. And with that, it's going to create opportunities for builders like us. But I think that it's going to put humanity in some interesting, decisions in the crosshairs of, I can now run a multi-billion-dollar fintech with 10 people versus a multi-million-dollar billion-dollar fintech like PayPal today that has 35,000 employees. It's an interesting conversation, no doubt.
I'm going to push back, not just for fun, but there's some specific
I
things that
love it.
I'm that just really jump out. And because I completely agree with your train of thought all the way through. We need to be masters of change management. That's no longer something that you can just be okay at. We need to be masterful at it. Every business needs to be masterful. You really need to understand your business. It's not okay to have a general sense and then delegate the knowledge to the next person, to the next person, to the next person, and then believe it's just working because all the numbers seem to
Agreed.
work all the way down. Who knows? Maybe those were just the local optimized numbers for that particular area. They might be what's actually needed. But one of the critical points of understanding that I think all of us struggle with as we're building businesses, but large companies have it as well, and they just don't see it in the same way, is understanding what makes your business scale. What's actually necessary to scale to that next customer? How much more do you need to satisfy that next customer? And we talk about it, but we don't always fully understand it. And your electrician example earlier is an interesting one, given the full arc. Even if they had perfect systems and perfect change management to handle all those leads coming in, talk to all those people, they still need humans at this moment going out and actually doing the work. It still, at the end of the day, needs to be
This.
people. And if you really understand your business well, I actually believe you're going to find more opportunities to think about it differently, apply people to it differently. And therefore, what we're seeing is, okay, businesses as they've been run for the last 100 years, because it kind of hasn't changed that much. We've expanded different groups and different ideas have come in and new teams have shown up, but a lot of it has been largely the same. Those are going to get flipped over. We're going to have to think differently. But I think as we understand our businesses better, we're going to find new pockets and new areas to go explore. And this is ultimately why although I'm hyper agreement to 1,000% that OpenAI and Google and everyone else, Meta, whomever, is going to drop in with these point solutions. I think they're always going to follow. I think it'll almost always be technical solutions. It'll rarely be business answers, because to really have a business answer, you have to understand the business, and that's something that we all have to become experts in. And I think it's happening. I think people will start to shift from the mundane tasks of moving a block from A to B and actually thinking about, why did I move it? Why did that move from
Mm-hmm.
here to there? What was the trigger to cause it to move, and how do I go upstream of that? So I do think there's a new modality, a new way of thinking. And I don't need to do the fancy word. There's a new way of thinking, but
Right?
we're just seeing the beginning of it. And I'm not sure how we help people learn through this process, because it's hitting them so fast and so hard. And this is why it's so intriguing that you started with stop the agents, right? And you started with, hey, we need you to think about your business. So as you're trying to pull through, do you think there's some sort of mission control? There's some way of pulling that together so people can start to do the learning? Like, how do you help businesses get through that in this moment?
Well, so I have 5 proprietary steps inside our business that help people get there. But you're really in a sweet spot. Whether this is the cherry on top or where we land, um, while I think about how tech companies operate and how the foundational providers could literally wipe out a whole section of of business and tech space by rolling out functionality, there is a very defensible marketplace, very defensible, and it is the marketplace that
Mhm.
requires humans. And so, where is that? Field services, construction, logistics, mobility, all of these spaces, plumbing, electricians, welders. These are all businesses that are actually growing and scaling faster than ever. Ford announced this morning, the CEO of Ford this morning, you'll see the stories on LinkedIn. They say they're 5,000 auto technicians short across all of their dealerships just to service vehicles. The fact is, there is a shortage in all of the trades, every one of the trades. And guess what? The trades are calling us. They want to automate their back office. There is no shortage of leads coming in. There's no shortage of more projects. There's no shortage of technicians. So what are they doing? They're automating route optimization. They're building mobile app platforms that have agents at the endpoint so they can bring new techs and onboard them quickly and give them all the education of an agent that knows everything about their job right there in their pocket all day long, rather than having to ride with a trainer or whatever the case may be. We're seeing that the nuanced spaces, which are legacy systems, field work, uh, proprietary platforms that are nuanced by human workflows that have not been updated
Yeah.
in decades. And I'll tell you what, our phones ring off the hook in the blue collar trade space. And guess why? Because there isn't an executive in the space that thinks it's going to take away jobs. This is a very interesting nuance. When I own an electrical contractor, I'm like, I don't care how much AI you use in the back office. It's not going to keep my guys from going and doing jobs. It's actually they're going to do more jobs. Now, if I'm calling into a tech company that's building a platform that turns, SQL databases into spreadsheets, I'm terrified for you. Like, shut her down. And so there's a different world out there for different what I call
Yeah.
opportunity zones. And those that are in the tech business building platforms and solutions and functionality in AI, I would not be running towards that fire. If you are in an operational business that requires humans to be successful, entertainment, sports, they're all going to be there for quite some time. Motorsports, they're all going to be there for quite some time. And so, needless to say, if I'm an AI startup or I'm building functionality, I'd be looking for marketplaces where I'm not offsetting headcount, but I'm increasing efficiency, profitability, and
This is a
outcomes.
perfect. th- I have to ask you this question then. So I ask everyone, okay, what's the human skill? So now I'm curious. What do you think it is that people need to invest time in and learn and embrace to be more ready for all these changes that are coming in AI?
So I have that is a great question. I shoot personal content and I share it with my personal network constantly. And I talk about AI a lot because a lot of my friends in my age group who I grew up with, friends, family members, they are all kind of scratching their head about it too in their personal lives. Hey, am I using it to lose weight? Am I using it to come up with new recipes? Whatever it is. So I talk about it a lot. And one of the number one questions I get from hundreds of people throughout any given month, how is AI going to impact my
Mm.
child going to college? What trades should they be considering or doing? And so I launched a piece on it just last week because I get so many questions about it. And where I land is people must get very good at things that the machines can't do. And when I say that, if you're in a career path where you're competing or participating with the machines, you might want to give it a little extra thought. And I say that because for the last 30 years, we've been putting people in cubicles, pecking away at keyboards, re entering data. And it's called white collar, middle America white collar work. It's an endangered species right now. And it's not the group that thinks they were ever going to be endangered. And you go, hey, they all went to college, got degrees, followed their career path, and now they're originating loans and they're typing in a person's name, and that space is dangerous. And so when I talk to people about what looks different for the future, or what skills would I upskill with,
Mm.
creativity. The machine is not more creative than humans. It never will be. It needs your ideas. It requires your ideas. Part two, connecting the dots that the computer can't connect. Humans are nuanced as much as anything else and the most powerful computer walking. Needless to say, our ability to identify the spots where computers are not going to be the benefactor, we need to be inserting it, humans into those spots. And I think over the long run, let's be a little sci-fi about it. Universal basic income will be something in our children's future without question. And you ask yourself, well, what are they going to do if they're paid to do nothing? Hopefully they're doing the things that are important.
And why does it have to be do
Let's
nothing?
solve some
Like why do
human
we assume
problems.
that comes with nothing?
Right. You don't
Maybe that
have to
comes
do
with doing
nothing.
something.
Right. You can absolutely, you can become charitable. You can become climate focused. You can do so many other things in your community. Elderly care. I walk 5 90-plus-year-old men every single morning. I meet them every morning at the corner. They run from 90 years old to 98 years old. We have a 1 mile walk we take every morning together. I would imagine everybody should have time for that walk if they don't got to go to work. And the things you learn from a 98-year-old person will blow your mind. And by the way, the stuff they learned from me about robots, the future, and everything else, I'm blowing their mind too. And so, needless to say, I hope humans find a place where they're creative, where they're thoughtful, where they're sharing with their communities, they're doing the right things. But thinking that you're going to be pecking on the computer for your career path, I would just go ahead and wad that up and throw it in the trash.
This has been fantastic. What a wonderful conversation. Thank you for joining.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. Matt, thank you for having me. I love what you're doing in the space. Your business is very needed in the AI space. So keep doing what you're doing. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. If you want to have a chat again sometime,
Let's do
track
it.
me down.
Thank
I'm
you.
in.